Hello students, welcome back to another exciting episode of Vajiram and Ravi's Daily Current Affair Analyst. Today we'll be taking up 5 topics, out of which the first 3 are going to be very crucial for the upcoming mains examination. So the first topic for the day is the debate surrounding unemployment in light of a report that has been published by RBI which claims around 8 crore jobs being created in last 4 years. Second, we'll take up the issue of enemy property in light of claims by descendants and purchasers of the property which belong to former citizens of British India who are now citizens of Pakistan and China. Third, we'll take up the new Indo-Japan collaboration on setting up a joint carbon credit mechanism. Fourth, we'll take up the recent verdict of International Court of Justice on Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories, which has been declared illegal by the court. And last, we'll take up Article 361 along with the privileges and immunities of presidents and governors being taken for scrutiny by the Supreme Court. Apart from that, we'll take up 4 important topics for the Prelims Snippets as well. So let's start the discussion. So the first topic for the day is the debate on unemployment, which has been started or reignited due to a report, that is the CLEMS India report published by RBI that claims around 8 crore jobs being created in last 3 to 4 years. This issue is important with respect to the GS3 syllabus of mains examination pertaining to issues relating to development and employment. So, getting into this debate, what we see in recent years is that each statistics that presents one point of view is getting countered by other statistics and reports that present an alternative picture. So in these times of contrasting statistics, how do we find what is the certainty and what is the path for us to go? So starting with this, the recent report by RBI, that is India's CLEMS database. Now CLEMS stands for K refers to capital, L refers to labor, E refers to energy, and M refers to material. So with this we get the acronym CLEM. So according to this database compiled and published by RBI, it is suggested by the report that 8 crore jobs were created in last 3 to 4 years. Immediately after this report, SBI published another data which indicated that in the last 10 years, that is from financial year 2014 till the end of financial year 2023, around 8.9 crore jobs have been created, that is in a span of 10 years. However, in the preceding period, that is from financial year of 2004 till financial year of 2014, roughly 6.6 crore jobs were created. So taken together, this figure of roughly 15 crore jobs being created in 2 decades compared to 8 crore jobs being created in the last 3 to 4 years is something that is not digestible. In addition to that, we have CMIE, which is a private entity, that is Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. And again, the indicators and the reports of CMIE indicate that unemployment rate in June 2024 is going on at an 8-month high of 9.2%, which again brings this claim of 8 crore jobs being created in the last 3 to 4 years under serious questioning. Last of all, we see the race for pursuing government jobs and the lakhs and crores of candidates and aspirants preparing for government job, which again is an indirect indicator that desirable jobs are not being created. But again, we should not end at a conclusion right from the start. Rather, we should be very clear with using these data sets to enhance our understanding of the situation. So let's get deeper into this. What exactly is this CLEMS database? CLEMS data is a comprehensive measurement tool to monitor and evaluate productivity growth in Indian economy. That is to say that this database does not estimate or try to calculate the employment or unemployment levels. Rather, it uses the government databases and statistics as its source to make inferences. So the data published by RBI in claims database, it is argued, should not be taken as a separate source or a separate data, but rather a reiteration of the official government data. Now, coming to the issue of unemployment, this becomes certainly challenging for Indian scenario as well, due to some special conditions that we'll be discussing. First of all, the biggest problem is the highly complex nature of Indian economy, where multiple sectors and segments are intertwined in a way that makes clear-cut identification of enterprises and employment a very challenging task. Secondly, the issue is of paucity of data. As we may know, roughly 94% of Indian enterprises and employment is in unorganized sector. That is to say, we have definite data of only about 6% of the workforce or the market. For 94% of the data, we have to refer to secondary sources and inferences, which again are a big cause of concern. Now, even with this secondary data, there are certain issues at play right now. First of all, these 94% of the unorganized sector companies and employment are evaluated on the basis of census, followed by urban frame survey, that is UFS. Now, as we all know that the census for 2021 has been delayed. So the last census that we have is of 2011. Similarly, the last urban frame survey was conducted in 2017, that is 7 years ago. So this data, even the secondary data that we have, is very outdated and needs to be updated. Now, in certain situations, when the recent data is not available, it is a standard practice to refer to the last available data. But these last 5 to 7 years have not exactly been normal years. There have been transformational changes and crises in these last decade, such as the introduction of GST, demonetization, the COVID pandemic, and also the NBFC crisis. So, in view of these extraordinary events that took place in Indian economy, it cannot be argued that we can use the last relevant data, because a lot of churn has undergone in this Indian economy. And if not for the worse, at least there is going to be a change in the rural, urban distribution of entities, of employment, of economic activity. So this change at least has to be factored in when we are taking up a survey of Indian economy and looking for specific data. So this is the issue with estimating unemployment rate in an economy like India, which is vast and at the same time 94% of which functions in the unorganized sector. So coming back to another issue, that is the issue of methodology when it comes to estimation of unemployment rate. We have two premier sources of data. One belongs to the government, which is Periodic Labour Force Survey, and the other is of CMIE, that is Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, which is a private entity. And usually there occurs a big gap in the unemployment rate figures of the two sources. Now, this again is due to a difference in methodology rather than a difference of picture of Indian economy. So what is exactly the difference? First of all, it is the income criteria. In PLFS, even if an individual is not receiving income, but he is going to work, such an individual is taken as employed. Whereas in the CMIE data for unemployment, only individuals who are receiving income for the work they do are taken to be as employed. Similarly, another issue is of disguised and underemployment. In the PLFS data, no distinction is made between disguised and underemployment. Rather, both these categories are included in the category of employed. This, however, is not the case when it comes to CMIE data. And lastly, it refers the third difference in methodology, and this happens to be the starkest, is frame of reference. For the PLFS data, the frame of reference is the usual status activity and the current weekly status, CWS. Now the current weekly status emphasizes that if an individual has obtained 1 hour of work in a day in any of the last 7 days, then he is taken to be as employed. On the other hand, according to CMI methodology, an individual who is working today, or that is in span of reference period of 1 day, only such an individual is taken to be as employed. So we see that with methodology, the figures and the estimates for employment and unemployment are likely to change, and the difference between the methodologies when it comes to PLFS and CMIE leads to a situation where the PLFS data tends to underestimate the unemployment rate, whereas the CMIE data presents a picture on the other end of the spectrum. So rather than a bias, the fault lies, or rather the scope of difference lies in the methodology itself. Where does this discussion leave us when it comes to getting an understanding of the unemployment picture? Well, for benefit of the individual citizens, it is important to remember that plurality of opinions and data sets is always a good thing. It allows us to understand a picture in a layered way rather than black or white. We understand the different shades of gray involved here. So with this in mind, all sorts of data, whether they support one point of view or they're opposed to one point of view, should be given the due respect provided they adhere to the methodology, which is transparent and coherent. As long as this is involved, we should not shoot the messenger, but rather look at the data and try to find a better path for the future. With this, we take up the question that can be asked on such a topic relating to unemployment. For example, this one, which says high unemployment rate is a bane in realization of demographic dividend. Discuss the role of reliable and coherent data in combating unemployment. So treat this question as a 10 marker and try to write it. Moving further to the next topic for the day, we are talking about the enemy property, that is the property of citizens of present Pakistan and China in India. Indian government has started a process where it is going to auction these properties which have been placed in the trusteeship of custodian of enemy property of India since 1968. This portion is important for both GS 1 and 2. For GS 1, this has relevance for the post-independence Indian history, and for GS 2, this is important with respect to bilateral relations between India and Pakistan. So, getting into the topic, first of all, what is an enemy country? Well, any country that has committed acts of aggression or war against India and her citizens is defined as an enemy country according to the Enemy Property Act of 1968. And the property that belongs to citizens of enemy country, the property that is located in India but belongs as or is owned by citizens of enemy countries, such property is declared as enemy property and is seized by the Indian government and placed in the trusteeship of custodian of enemy properties of India. Now, how did this situation emerge where such a vast number of properties across India have been taken up by the state? The genesis of this issue can be traced to independence of India and partition of India. These two events occurred simultaneously and therefore have had huge ramifications for post-independence India. So, partition led to a situation where there was a huge flux of population. Large numbers of Muslims migrated or sought refuge in Pakistan from India, whereas India received a very large number of Hindu and Sikh refugees. Now, both the states, India and Pakistan, treated the outgoing refugees not as refugees but as evacuees. That is, they were evacuated, and the property left behind by these evacuees, This was taken up for resettlement and rehabilitation of incoming migrants. So this was the plan to use for it. However, as the violence subsided, people who had migrated to across the border desired to return and sell and dispose of their property in the erstwhile country where they were inhabiting. Due to these concerns, in 1950, the Delhi Pact was signed between Liaquat Ali Khan and Jawaharlal Nehru in 1950, which recognized the right of refugees to return and dispose or sell their property left behind while they were migrating to their new home. This right was recognized in this agreement. However, not much progress could be made because India, on the one hand, claimed that the property left behind by Hindu and Sikh refugees in Pakistan was of substantially higher value than the property left behind by Muslim refugees in India. So this disagreement on the value of property claimed by refugees, this prevented any concrete solution until a point of time when in 1968, India placed these pending properties that were under custodianship of the state in the trusteeship of custodian of Indian properties. However, in the 1971 war between India and Pakistan, Pakistan disposed of or sold off all the properties left behind by Hindu and Sikh refugees in Pakistan, and thus ended its share of enemy properties. India, on the other hand, has not taken such a drastic step yet. However, there are certain issues that continue to plague this enemy property that is being placed in the trusteeship of custodian of enemy property of India. So we'll be taking up those issues and try to understand what is the argument that is going on in the newspaper. So first of all, what are the issues that are related to this custodianship of enemy properties? Firstly, right to property has been recognized as a natural right and a basic human right in a number of international conventions as well as by the Indian Supreme Court as well. So depriving another individual of this right to their property is something that cannot be justified quite easily. Second thing, Supreme Court has in fact iterated in 2006 that the custodian is actually just a trustee, and custodianship does not refer or is not synonymous with ownership, and therefore the custodian cannot sell or dispose this property. Another issue is that of claims of descendants. While their ancestors may have been citizens of enemy countries at the time of war, India presently is not in a state of war with Pakistan or China. So, do their descendants also do not have a claim on the property of their ancestors in India? The 2016 amendment precisely ensured that it deprived the descendants of original owners of enemy property in India to stake a claim on this property. And last issue is the issue of subsequent buyers. When these individuals left behind their property and migrated to another country, they often ended up selling portions of their property to somebody else in their erstwhile home country. So, while on one hand they received their share of settlement, the new owners failed to acquire actual real ownership of the property since it was seized and placed under the trusteeship of custodians of enemy properties of India. So, where are these subsequent buyers left? These are some of the issues that have to be addressed. Only then can we expect that this issue of enemy properties in India can come to a swift resolution. Now, some important statistics for you that you should be mindful of with regard to enemy property in India. First of all, nearly 9,000 properties are there in India that belong to citizens of Pakistan, whereas only 126 properties belonging to Chinese nationals are there in India. So, enemy properties in India refers to property of nationals of two countries as of now, Pakistan and China. Now, coming to the absolute number of enemy properties in India, UP has the largest number of enemy properties across India, followed by West Bengal, and third is Delhi. With respect to properties of Chinese nationals, however, it is Meghalaya which has the maximum number of enemy properties, followed by West Bengal, and at third place stands Assam. So, and lastly, these 9,000 plus properties of enemies that are located in India, their value is estimated to be roughly around 1 lakh crore, which is a substantial sum. Now, the arguments in favor of auctioning these properties are in front of us. At one hand, Pakistan has already disposed or sold the properties left behind by Hindu and Sikh migrants and refugees. So, India should do the same. Secondly, the value of this property, that is 1 lakh crore, is a substantial sum that can be used for socio-economic imperatives in India. With this, what should be the way forward for India? Indian government should exercise its right in special case and seize the property and ensure that the sale of this property is carried through. These properties are auctioned and the proceeds of the auction are used for socio-economic development of India. At the same time, official statement is also required over this issue, which should highlight that Pakistan had refused and ended all possibilities of a settlement when it sold the properties belonging to Hindu and Sikh refugees in 1971. Lastly, it can consider this option that the claims of descendants and subsequent buyers may be recognized in special cases, but this should be on a case-to-case basis rather than as a general policy. So, with this we finish this topic. What could be a question that can come from this topic in the upcoming mains examination? It could be, throw light on the origin of the Office of Custodian of Enemy Properties of India in backdrop of partition of India. Try this question again as a 10 marker. And in this we will be covering the background of partition as well as the subsequent development after that. Now, coming to the third article for the day, Joint Carbon Credit Mechanism. India and Japan have declared their plan to sign an MOU and establish a joint carbon credit mechanism under Paris Agreement of 2016. This article is important for both GS2 and GS3. In GS2, it has implications, or a possible question can come up from the bilateral relation segment of the syllabus, whereas in GS3, the focus is on conservation, environmental pollution, and degradation. So, coming to this, the Paris Agreement was signed in 2016, and it marked a remarkable shift where all countries, irrespective of whether they are developed or developing or least developed, were obligated to take up targets for emission reductions, but these targets were to be determined nationally. Hence, this obligation under Article 4 refers to that all parties to the agreement have to present nationally determined contributions at an interval of 5 years regularly and try to surpass them. In accordance with this, the mechanism for transferring of carbon credits gained through mitigation measures, two specific initiatives, two specific articles refer to two different methods to ensure participation and a global convergence in this fight against climate change. Under the Article 6.2, bilateral and decentralized agreements between two states are allowed in which they can share the mitigation outcomes. That is, they can collaborate on reducing emissions, and the carbon credits earned through these projects would be shared between the two or more than two participant countries in a predetermined manner, bilaterally or multilaterally. On the other hand, Article 6.4 refers to a centralized mechanism for monitoring, reporting, and verification of carbon credits. So, just a quick recap for you, all of you. What is a carbon credit? A carbon credit one carbon credit is equal to 1 gigaton of CO2 equivalent of greenhouse gases whose emissions has been prevented. So this is how the Paris Agreement seeks to catalyze emission reductions by promoting both bilateral, multilateral as well as centralized arrangements to ensure global convergence in this fight against climate change. What have been the steps proposed by India and Japan in this upcoming MOU? First of all, a joint committee is to be established which will first review and select projects that would be taken up in this joint carbon credit mechanism. Secondly, a registry will be maintained in which projects would be listed and their corresponding mitigation outcomes. Would be listed as well. This is to ensure that the carbon credits for one project are not exceeded beyond what they originally delivered. That is to prevent double counting, which we'll take up in the next slide. So, what is the importance of such measures? First of all, this is a very, very crucial and important way to catalyze emission reductions from moving towards low emission paths to development towards a net zero path to development. Secondly, as we mentioned about the registry between India and Japan, this is going to prevent double counting. That is, the mitigation outcomes of one project are counted by one country only, or that is the carbon credits totally counted. That is, the carbon credits cumulatively counted for one project are not exceeded by claims of multiple partners. This is a shortcoming that was actually pretty devastating for the RED Plus program, in which multiple partner countries claimed carbon credits in much excess of mitigation achieved, or the CO2 emissions or greenhouse emissions that were prevented. So this is a very great crucial step to ensure double counting is prevented. Thirdly, it is going to boost green jobs and investment along with facilitating transfer of technology as well as larger capacity building. So what should be the way forward for India as well as Japan? First priority is to develop scalable solutions. That is, the projects that are taken up by India and Japan should be of such nature that they can be easily replicated in a large region and not very specific to the region itself. Secondly, this is a very good platform to develop consensus and create a blueprint for sustainable and green accounting practices. And lastly, it is a platform for both India and Japan to create a model for the rest of the world to follow in bilateral and multilateral cooperation when it comes to the fight against climate change. A question can be framed on this topic. The one we have taken up here is bilateral cooperation in emissions reduction is the first step towards global convergence in combating climate change. Discuss in view of Indo-Japan joint carbon credit mechanism. So this question can be taken up as a 15 marker. Try to write it, and this topic is going to be of great importance for the upcoming mains examination. Moving to the fourth topic of the day, we take up the recent verdict of International Court of Justice on the Israeli occupation. ICJ has declared Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories, that is Gaza Strip and West Bank, as outrightly illegal. In fact, it went to such an extent and claimed that this was de facto annexation. And this verdict has great implications for both West Asia as well as the larger world. This topic is relevant for GS2 mains examination with respect to international relations and its larger implications for rest of the world. So moving further, first we'll have a look at the ICJ. This was one of the 6 principal organs of UN that were established when United Nations was founded. However, it is the only organization out of the 6 principal organs which is not located in New York. Where is it located? The headquarters of International Court of Justice is located in Hague, that is in Netherlands. Coming to the composition of ICJ, it includes 15 judges. Each judge has a tenure of 9 years and elections are conducted every 3 years. 1/3 of the judges, that is 5 judges, retire. And the seats, these 15 seats are allocated on the basis of regional representation. So seats are allocated to region wise, and the countries falling in that region vote for particular country in the election process to elect judges of International Court of Justice. And it is expected that once a judge is elected to ICJ, he is not going to allow his nationality to influence his judicial decisions while in office. So the official languages of ICJ are French and English, and its jurisdiction is limited to 2 types of cases. In the contentious case, that is where the judgment, where the judicial case is actually a legal dispute between 2 states, the jurisdiction of ICJ is binding and final. Similarly, when it comes to advisory opinions, in such situations, even though the judgment is binding, the ICJ lacks the requisite mechanism to enforce its judgment. So this is the brief structure, composition and jurisdiction of International Court of Justice. Moving to this issue and the implications of this verdict. First of all, this is not the first United Nations General Assembly, Security Council or judicial opinion which has criticized Israeli occupation. The UNSC 2234 resolution of 2016 clearly criticized the expansion of illegal Jewish settlements in West Bank. Further, this process of establishing Jewish settlements in occupied Palestinian territories goes directly against the Geneva Convention and the Article 49, which prevents transfer of population either from your country to another or from another country to someplace else. Most importantly, Israel had been claiming that in subsequent negotiations between the Palestinian authorities and Israel and other countries of the world, it has been emphasized that the solution to Israel-Palestine issue has to be a political solution. It cannot be a legal or a judicial solution. So it had been contesting the jurisdiction of International Court of Justice. This argument has been thoroughly nullified and not accepted by the International Court of Justice, which has ruled that even though the solution has to be political, international rules continue to be binding on both Israel and Palestine. In addition to this, the verdict is a very stringent criticism of Israel's policy in Palestine, and this becomes significant also in light of the International Criminal Court's proceeding with respect to war crimes and crimes of genocide being pursued against Israel. Lastly, the verdict has clearly given a call to end Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories. This again is something that is going to have huge ramifications in the public opinion in traditional supporters of Israel, that is US and UK. Thus, the magnanimity of this verdict has to be acknowledged, and this is going to have huge ramifications for the entire world. Now, coming to the last topic for the day, that is of Article 361. Supreme Court has recently decided that it will take a review of the immunity against criminal proceedings that is granted to presidents and governors in Article 361. This issue is relevant from a UPSC preparation point of view for GS2, which deals with structure, organization and functioning of the executive. So, going further into this, Article 361, what does it essentially mean? The article is titled Protection of Presidents and Governors, and it contains privileges and immunities that are provided to holders of these constitutional offices so that they can perform their duty and their tasks without any fear or favor. So, what are these privileges and immunities? First of all, both these constitutional post holders, that is Honorable President and Honorable Governor, are not answerable to any court for any act done in their official capacity. Similarly, Clause 2 says that no criminal proceedings can be instituted or continued during the term of office. That is, even if a criminal proceeding was ongoing on a person and the person is elected to the office of president or to the office of governor, those criminal proceedings will have to be halted. Now, another immunity granted to these holders of these constitutional offices is that no process for arrest or imprisonment can be initiated by any court during the term of their office. And lastly, even with respect to civil proceedings, no action can be taken or instituted, no proceedings can be instituted against president or governor until after the expiry of 2 months from the date when a notice regarding these allegations was given in writing to these holders of these constitutional posts. So these are the privileges and immunities granted to presidents and governors under Article 361. And now we'll try to have a look at what is the reason behind giving them this immunity. First of all, the president and the governor is the respective de jure head of nation and state respectively. That is, according to the principle of sovereign immunity, which is again based on the principle that the king can do no wrong. With this in mind, the constitution makers decided to grant immunity to president and governor so that they can continue to function unabruptedly and in a dignified manner as the head of state. Secondly, most of the official actions that are performed by president and governors, these are performed on the aid and advice of Council of Ministers, representative government. Being a part of the basic structure doctrine of Indian Constitution, ensures that president and governors have very limited scope of discretion. In most cases, the actions of president and governor are on aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, and that is why it would be incorrect to hold them liable for those actions. But there are certain areas where the president and governor can exercise their discretion, such as in case of hung house, which party or leader should be invited to form the government and prove their majority. So in such cases, there is discretion, but again, the scope of judicial intervention is defined already. Lastly, the president actually takes an oath to protect and preserve the Constitution of India, and this involves even resisting measures that are suggested and advised by the Council of Ministers, but which the president may deem to be going against the values and essence of the Constitution. In such a situation, so that the president is not forced and so that the president is free to follow his or her conscience, these immunities are deemed necessary for them to function. However, at the same time, these immunities are also likely to create few questions, such as, first of all, this blanket immunity undermines the rule of law, of which Article 14, that is, right to equality, is a cardinal feature. Secondly, this blanket immunity can also lead to a situation where the governor or the president may try to broaden their discretion. Such cases are being highlighted in judiciary and being taken up by the judiciary with respect to certain governors acting in contrary to the advice of Council of Ministers. Lastly, there is a possibility of a constitutional crisis emerging as well, wherein governor and the Council of Ministers may not see eye to eye, and the governor can take up decisions that are contrary to the advice of Council of Ministers. So these situations have to be balanced and have to be assessed while we are assessing the desirability of the immunities granted to presidents and governors. So what should be the way forward for the judiciary? Well, this is an opportune moment which allows the Supreme Court to assess to what extent are these privileges and immunities desirable, and if whether there should be some conditions, some criteria attached to the same to ensure that these provisions under Article 361 do not become a ground for constitutional crisis or constitutional conflicts. Now, moving to the 4 topics for prelim snippets today, we'll be taking up the following topics. First is the digitalization project being taken up at National Archives of India, Archives 2.0. Second topic would be Wagnak, that is the weapon with which Shivaji Maharaj assassinated Bijapuri General Afzal Khan. Third, we'll take up the levels of uranium that are deemed safe for consumption and drinking water. And fourth, we'll take up the Maidans of Assam, which have been nominated for inclusion in World Heritage Sites lists. So, starting with Archives 2.0, nearly 34 crore documents are going to be digitalized in this massive revamp of National Archives of India. National Archives is a repository of all non-current government documents and records and holds them in trust of the government. All documents which are deemed of secrets of the state are excluded from this. However, as and when these secret documents are declassified, these are entrusted to National Archives for use of scholars and researchers. So, this National Archives of India is actually a successor of colonial department, that was Imperial Records Department, which was established in Calcutta in 1891. It was in 1911 when the capital was moved to Delhi that the department was shifted to Delhi, and in 1926 the present building of National Archives of India was instituted and the department moved into that building. This institution holds records dating as far back as 1748 and functions under the Ministry of Culture. Now, Wagnak of Shivaji, this was the weapon with which Shivaji Maharaj assassinated Bijapuri General Afzal Khan. As we all know, in the initial days of his conquest, Shivaji was taking on both the Deccan Sultanates, that is of Bijapur, Ahmednagar and Golconda, as well as the Mughal state. In this process of confrontation with the Deccan Sultanates, Afzal Khan, he was deputed by Adil Shahi dynasty of Bijapur to take on Shivaji, and he laid a vast siege to both the forts as well as the countryside of Maharaja Shivaji's territories. A peace meeting was scheduled between Shivaji Maharaj and Afzal Khan, and in this meeting, there are multiple versions of the meeting. One version suggests that it was Afzal Khan who attacked Shivaji. Another version was where Afzal Khan was assassinated by Shivaji. Irrespective of what the truth was, the outcome of the meeting was that the two ended up fighting. And in this fight, Shivaji assassinated or killed Afzal Khan with this Wagnak. Wagnak means tiger's claws. So as you can look at it, these could be placed on your fist, and with this you could make deep penetrating wounds into your opponent. So this is the Wagnak which was given to Britishers by the Prime Minister of Peshwas, and it has been on display in London since then. However, for the upcoming 7 months, this Wagnak has been returned to India and would be on display in Satara. This incident of Shivaji assassinating an Afzal Khan has been a source of a number of literary works since then in history, such as Afzal Khan Wad by Ajnan Das, Jedhe Shakhavali. This is a chronology of the clan of Jedhe to which Shivaji belonged. Sabhasat Bakhar, this was another panegyric that was written in praise of Shivaji during the reign of Raja Ram, his son. And lastly, Shivaji's utterances that was published by Bal Gangadhar Tilak in 1897 in Kesari, for which a libel case was instituted against him and he was imprisoned. So, moving to the third topic for the day, the issue of uranium contamination in drinking water. A recent report by Bhabha Atomic and Research Center, BARC, has said that uranium levels of up to 60 microgram per liter, that is 0.06 milligram per liter. This is microgram, this is milligram. up to this level of uranium presence in drinking water is deemed safe for human consumption. So first of all, what are the sources through which uranium contaminates drinking water? Firstly, it is the rock system that can lead to dispersion of uranium in the aquifers between the rock systems. Secondly, increased groundwater extraction create a situation of oxidation in these deep reservoirs that leads to leaching off of uranium. And thirdly, presence of chemicals such as sodium bicarbonate, which increase the uptake of uranium in water. So these are the causes broadly due to which uranium can contaminate drinking water. Now to the question of acceptable limits or acceptable levels of uranium in drinking water, it is the Atomic Energy Regulatory Board that has, according to the legislation, which has the final say, and it has set a limit of 0.06 milligram per liter, this very same, long time back. In contrast to that, we have an Indian standard of 10500 semicolon 2012. So this is the Indian standard that is the reference when it comes to assessing the level of radioactivity permissible in drinking water safe for consumption. Now the issue with this Indian standard is that it does not deal with the level of concentration of elements. Rather, this is based on the level of radiation. So the concentration of the radioactive element is not accounted for in it. The cumulative radiation that is being emitted by the constituents in the water, only that has been defined in this standard. So the constitution of elements has not been fixed in this level. Now the third standard is that of Bureau of Indian Standards. This came up in 2016 and it set a level of 0.03 milligram or 30 microgram per liter. And this limit is essentially the same limit that was prescribed by World Health Organization as well. So now the last topic for Prelims Snippets today is that of Assam's Moidans. These Moidans have been recommended by India for inclusion in the list of World Heritage Sites. These Moidans represent a late medieval tradition of mound burial system that was practiced by the Thai Ahoms, the Ahom rulers of Assam. So we see these Moidans where rulers and their family members have been buried for since at least late 13th century onwards. Now, it is the Moidams of Charaideo which have been recommended or nominated by India for inclusion in list of World Heritage Sites. Now, Charaideo also happens to be the birthplace of legendary Ahom general Lachit Borphukan, who was responsible for the defeat of Mughals at the hand of Ahoms in 17th century. Now, based on his legendary bravery, there is also a Lachit Borphukan medal. This Lachit Borphukan medal is instituted in the National Defence Academy and is awarded to the best cadet of every batch of NDA. So the best cadet out of every batch is awarded this Lachit Borphukan medal. Now currently the Moidams of Charaideo, they are on the tentative list of World Heritage Sites, and this is the stage in the upcoming session, that is the 46th session of World Heritage Committee, when around 28 sites will be taken up for discussion on whether they should be included in the World Heritage list or not, and if they are included, should they be included as natural, mixed or cultural category. So whether they have to be included in the list of World Heritage Sites, and if yes, under what category. This is going to be decided in the 46th session of World Heritage Committee that is also taking place in New Delhi as we speak. So with this we end today's discussion. Thank you for listening so patiently, and I hope this was productive for you. If you have any doubts, please feel free to reach out to us.